awoke and found myself in a small cave-like room with a window carved and draped with a heavy cloth partially opened, allowing intense light to illuminate the room. My head pounded and a dull ache throbbed through my limbs. I blinked, trying to focus on my surroundings. The room was small and cluttered, with various herbs hanging from the ceiling, drying in bunches. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of mysterious powders and liquids, each meticulously labeled in a language I did not recognize. Panic surged through me as I realized I had no memory of how I got here, nor any recollection of who I was. My thoughts were a chaotic whirlpool, fragments of images and sensations that made no sense. I pushed myself up from the rough wooden bed and swung my legs over the side. The floor was cool against my bare feet, grounding me in this strange reality. A refreshing light breeze caused the drape to flutter. Through the small window, I could see the arid landscape stretching out before me, vast, rocky formations rising from a barren desert. The sky was a dull, hazy blue, and the brightness seemed strangely intense, casting stark shadows across the dry ground. Across the room, a simple wooden table held a folded uniform. I shuffled over, my legs weak and unsteady. The uniform was navy blue in iridescent color, made of a durable, synthetic material. As I unfolded it, a small rectangular patch caught my eye. It bore the name Ian embossed in bold white letters. Ian? Was that my name? It felt foreign and familiar all at once. Just as I was about to put the uniform on, the door creaked open. An old man entered, his skin a deep melanated hue with large freckles scattered across his face. His ears were large, wrapped partially in a turban-style head wrap. He was dressed in simple, lightweight woven garments that flowed with his movements. He set down a basket filled with fresh herbs and fruits on the table and turned to me, a gentle smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Seeing my confusion, he gestured to himself and then to me, his fingers moving in a rudimentary sign language that I instinctively understood. He pointed to the uniform and then to me again, nodding. I pointed to the name tag and then to myself, mouthing the name Ian. The old man smiled wider, clapping his hands softly as if to applaud my deduction. Who is this man and why is he helping me? I wondered. The days began to blend together as I recovered. Each morning, the old man would leave before the sunrise, only to return in the evening with fresh herbs and vegetables. During the day, I explored the small dwelling, trying to piece together any clues about my past. The old man's collection of books and jars fascinated me, though I could not read the strange script. I began helping him with simple tasks, learning through his patient guidance and the rudimentary sign language we developed. I also discovered the reason for the unusual brightness of the daylight, and likely the reason for the harsh, arid conditions is due to the dual suns that move in sync across the sky each day. If it weren't for the constant breeze and cool nights, this place would be unbearable. The herbs he brought seemed to have miraculous properties, accelerating my recovery in ways that defied logic. My strength returned swiftly, and my mind began to clear. The old man introduced me to various herbs, teaching me their names and uses. He pointed to each one, enunciating the name slowly, and I repeated it back, feeling the strange syllables roll off my tongue. Over time, I began to grasp some basics of his language. Despite the slow progress, I felt a growing connection to the old man. He was patient and kind, never pressing me for details about my past, which I was grateful for since I had none to give. He called me by the name Ian without hesitation, and I accepted it, for it was the only piece of my identity I had. One evening, as we sat by the small hearth eating a simple meal of steamed vegetables and herbs, I noticed a faraway look in the old man's eyes. I tapped my chest and pointed to him, then made a sweeping gesture, hoping to ask where he went each day. He smiled and mimicked my gesture, then pointed to the horizon, the direction he always left in. He then mimed gathering herbs and pointed to the various plants hanging around the room. I nodded, understanding that he ventured out to forage each day, but there was something more, something he wasn't telling me. His eyes held a depth of experience and perhaps a hint of sadness that he masked with his kind demeanor. Days turned into weeks, and my understanding of the old man's language grew. I could string together basic sentences and understand most of what he said. He began to teach me more complex aspects of his craft, showing me how to prepare salves and poultices from the herbs. He spoke of the healing properties of each plant, his voice carrying a reverence that hinted at a deeper connection to the natural world. One night, as we sat by the fire, I gathered the courage to ask about my past. I pointed to myself, then to my head, mimicking the confusion I felt. The old man's expression grew serious. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes meeting mine with a solemn intensity. He mimed a fall, then pointed to my head and then to himself, indicating that he had found me injured. I nodded, the pieces starting to fit together. He had found me, brought me here, and nursed me back to health. But why was I here? Where had I come from? The old man seemed to sense my turmoil and squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. He pointed to the uniform with my name and then to the door, as if to say that the answers were out there, waiting to be discovered. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the rounded red sandstone ceiling, I felt a resolve harden within me. I needed to find out who I was and why I was here. The uniform with the name Ian was my only clue, a thread to pull on in the vast tapestry of my lost memories. And though the old man's dwelling had become a sanctuary, I knew that my journey was just beginning. The morning light filtered through the window, casting a warm glow over the room. I dressed in the uniform, the fabric now familiar and comforting against my skin. I stepped outside, the cool air invigorating me. The old man's dwelling was carved into a high on a rock column formation in a canyon. The vast, barren landscape stretched out before me, a testament to the harshness of this world. In the far distance, I could see a large plateau, a place where I assumed the old man traveled to gather his herbs, fruits, and vegetables. I approached him, determination in my step. I pointed to myself, then to the horizon, and mimed walking. The old man watched me, his eyes studying my face. Finally, he shook his head, pointing to the harsh landscape and mimicking the intense heat. I understood that venturing out alone was not an option. The environment was too unforgiving, and I would need his guidance. He motioned for me to follow him. Together, we began the descent down the narrow rocky path that wound its way from his dwelling. The old man moved with a practiced ease, his feet sure on the uneven ground. I followed closely, the name Ian, a steady mantra in my mind. I didn't know what I would find or where this journey would lead me, but I knew one thing for certain. I would uncover the truth of who I was and why I had come to this strange, beautiful place.